Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Oracle class for the 25th of June, 26. It's good to be here. And I've got a couple of visitors with us today, or special guests with us today. We have Mike Stello with the Oak Ridge Public Library. And I have Steve Goodpasture, who is my good friend and an expert on the history of wheat, Dillis, and that area out there near K25. In addition to that, I want to talk about what we do with our next session, which is coming up in September. And I would love your input on that. So be thinking about that as we go through. And near the end, I will bring us up a slide to talk about it. Well, let's just go ahead and get started. Remember, you can bring up anything you want to as we're going along. You don't have to wait on us. You can interrupt us at any time. And I appreciate it if you remember to mute your microphone, keep it muted, use the speaker view so you can see a large image of the person speaking, and use the gallery view if you want to see everyone. Use chat to enter your questions. I'll try to watch that. If I miss it, just tell me you've sent me something. But an alternate method is just ask your question, and we don't, any one of the three of us, mind being interrupted. So if it's okay, Mike, we'll let you go first, and I'll keep letting these folks in as they come. And tell us about what's going on at the library. Oh, I want to show something to introduce you, and then Steve will do yours a little bit later. Just hold on a minute. But Mike, I want to first share the screen and talk about something I encountered when I was at the museum. No, I promised you all that I would show you something about the Oppenheimer movie and hidden history, the interview with Heather McClanahan. And I'm just going to show I'm going to tell you that if you go to YouTube and just look for hidden histories, stories from the secret city, this will come up, and you can see the interview that we had with Heather. Now I'm going to show you. No, I'm not. It's going to want me to edit it, and that ain't going to work. All right, let's leave it at that. And if you want to see that interview, remember, we're doing the premiere on the 20th of July. And we're also going to interview Kai Bird on hidden history, stories with the secret city, about the secret city. And we'll do that on July the 8th. And then you can check on that if you like, and I'll post it on Facebook. So we've got Mike and we got Steve. Now I'm going to give you a little insight into Mike. He doesn't know I'm going to do this, but one of the displays that he's put up out there that's relatively unknown in Oak Ridge is about the S50 thermal diffusion plant. And he's put a good display together. This is the pamphlet that he has that he can hand out, or you can pick up there at the museum, that talks about S50. I'm so glad to see him do that, because not many people know about S50. That was the thermal diffusion that was recommended by Oppenheimer to Groves, because they didn't have the K25 gaseous diffusion working yet because of the barrier material, but they had the world's largest steam plant there. So Oppenheimer knew the Navy was experimenting with thermal diffusion. So he went to Groves and said, you should build a thermal diffusion plant, because the hardest part of getting U-235 is that early bit, that little bit, to get it from 0.7% up to 1 or 2%. So they did that. Groves went to the contractor and said, I need a thermal diffusion plant built. I need it built right by this steam plant, and I need it in 90 days. And remember, they thought they were in a race with Germany. The contractor said, that's impossible. It can't be done. Groves looked him in the eye and said, you've got 80 days. They built it in 76 days, operated it for about 3 months. and it's thought that it shortened the war by about 3 weeks. There's also a really good timeline that Mike has posted there that covers some key dates throughout the Manhattan Project era. And he's got a picture there. That is the thermal diffusion plant, and that is the steam plant. I believe this was a postcard, but it does show you what they look like, and they were right on the riverbank. So that display is at the Oak Ridge Public Library. Okay, Mike, I hope I didn't steal much of your thunder. Go ahead and give us your presentation.
All right. Well, thanks, Ray. Can you hear me okay?
I got you very good. And
okay.
You're looking good outdoors there.
Yeah, it is my vacation week. So not that I don't wear these on Fridays at work anyway, but well, gosh, a lot of things are going on at the library. We've just finished our children's remodel. It looks great. Completely, new furniture, new shelves, everything in the children's room. So if you get a chance to come, well, you may have already had a chance to see it, but it looks really nice. Of course, the restrooms, just as important, maybe more important to a lot of the patrons that come in every day. They're completely remodeled also from the ground up. They actually tore up all the concrete, put new piping in, and they're ADA compliant, and they look great. It's nice to have those finished. So that also opens up the auditorium again, because the children's room was temporarily located in there. So, and the Oak Ridge room, we recently finished kind of rearranging our furniture, kind of adjusting things from storage. So it's looking, ship shape for the moment, but it looks much better. If you haven't been in since the new glass has gone up, it's a recent expansion of it. It looks a lot better. And we're going to jump back into doing our collections. We've scanned probably 5 or 6 phone books and city directories that are now available on the website. We're working on getting the word search capability for it. In uploading it, that didn't work out like we thought, but I think we're just within a few weeks we'll have that finished. Looking for volunteers. Go ahead.
What about the copies of the Oak Ridger and the Oak Ridge Journal? Are you going to scan those as well?
Well, of course, we have from the first one, the journal, September 4th, 43 to about a couple months after the bomb drops are already on our website. They've been there for a while. They may not be as easy to get to, but if anybody wants to see those, the Oak Ridger, that's one of our top priorities, is getting it digitized, because, I read it constantly, and I'm always looking for articles for people. And sometimes the more recent ones in the 60s and 70s and 80s are harder to find in a way than the ones in the 40s. Certain things tend to stand out in the older papers. But yeah, that will be something within the next year we'll be able to word search. But we have the film and we have the originals, but it's pretty tedious to just try to find an article your Uncle John wrote in 1967. It's I'm getting there. I haven't got it memorized yet, but if I did, hey, now that's going to be a big tool. And Haley Subi, our tech services person, which I'd like to point out, also helped me with the S50. It was fun because she had never heard of it, and it started in the workroom there at the library. What's S50? So then she actually was going to do an Oppenheimer display, and in mid-gear, just shift gears in midstream and said, well, let's do an S50 display, and then we'll do an Oppenheimer display. So she learned most of that stuff I provided with the data and the photos, and I let her do the timeline and just kind of QA'd it and everything. And it was educational for the library. The rest of the staff learned about S50. So that was fun. The only thing I would like to add to the S50 that's not on there is, of course, Evelyn Hancock was the owner of the Furcleave Corporation. Her husband died shortly before that whole project started, and she actually was the only female that I'm aware of owner of a major contractor like that. And she was the one, that owned the company during this, furious pace of finishing the contract. Colonel Mark Fox actually was the guy on the ground there that saw it from start to finish, and he was recommended by General Nayland, actually. So Groves and Nichols had contact with General Nayland, and they said, hey, Mark Fox is who we would recommend. So I thought that was kind of a neat tie to to General Nayland and UT.
Okay, Mike, you've just created an assignment for yourself.
Uh-oh.
I would like to have a historically speaking story about what you just talked about. The first lady, the only lady you're aware of that had a contract with the Army Corps of Engineers, and
Yeah.
bring in Nayland. That'll be a good local connection. So no rush,
Well,
no dateline. Just do it for me sometime.
and it took a couple years, but I did find a couple pictures of Mrs. Hancock. Of
Good.
course, she outlived her husband about 30 years or so, but I found a couple of pictures of her in some newspaper articles. She continued to do business and stuff after the war. Of course, Faircleve was more of a wartime project, but it was Ferguson and Cleveland companies, and so she was at the helm for a while. But
Okay, good. Now back to the library.
okay, let's see. So yeah, so that's basically the children's room. Of course, gosh, we've got new carpet, and the glassed areas, with the Oak Ridge room and the new conference room, which some of you I can see in there have been in and actually used the glass conference room. And it's worked out really nicely because you can reserve it. You can come in, and if no one's in there, and just impromptu have a little meeting, or you can reserve it a week in advance and do meetings there. Let's see, I was trying to think. We've done so much on the actual. Of course, we've got the new front desk, little staff changes, little additions to staff, just minor things like that. But it's a lot happening. It's kind of good to be on vacation this week, and after all that fury of the grand reopening, it was exciting. We had over 500 people at the grand reopening to see the new children's room and the new bathrooms. So yeah, if you have any questions, I can't think of anything other than that. If anybody does want to volunteer, we can use during when we were closed for when the computer problem happened, and then we kind of were handicapped for a while with our volunteers. During that time, we lost a few to college and to just life and things like that. So we're always open for new volunteers, and that's very minimal commitment. An hour or two a week or every other week. There's
Okay,
all sorts of fun tasks to do.
good. And you don't have to be a young college student.
Oh no. Some of my best volunteers, Jeffrey, one of my best volunteers, he's been doing it for 15 years, I guess, and he's been retired from ORIU. He's great.
Very good.
Yeah. And Ray, I did want to take time and thank you for all your contributions to FOL and all your service there. We also need help there, I guess, with
Yeah,
some,
we always do. All right. Any questions for Mike? Anything you want to know about the Oak Ridge room? What's in there? How you find it? Any question for Mike? Just unmute yourself and ask away. Well, Mike, we will not keep you longer. You can stay as long as you want, but we appreciate you being with us. And thanks again for joining us. Wait, I got something in the chat. Hold on a minute.
okay. Is that about the hours? Is that what I'm
What are the current
saying?
hours? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I work, Monday through Friday, and I'm there from 10 to 6. I come in at 9. We don't open until 10. So at 10 to 6, Monday through Friday, I'm there. Walk-in appointment, whatever. If you want to look at yearbooks, newspapers, vertical files of, various Oak Ridge things, or collections, you can look up individual collections in the catalog, So yeah, Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. I do a little front desk time, but they usually allow me to pull away if someone shows up at the desk. I can go to the Oak Ridge room and help them.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming, and your choice. Looks like you're enjoying the outdoors, a little bit of a breeze there. So
Yeah.
you can either stay with us or thanks for coming. All right.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Very good. Now, I want to show one slide here before I bring Steve on. I think it's one. This history of wheat with Steve Goodpasture. And I've got a little clip there and show you where I got it from Wikipedia. But it shows that people were there early, and I'm sure Steve will tell you about Bald Hill. I have no idea how it got that name, but I'll bet you he does. But I do know how it got the name Wheat. It was named after the postmaster, Frank Wheat. So with that little bit of an introduction from me, let's bring Steve Goodpasture on and let him give us some information about wheat and that area. All right, Steve?
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate you asking me to do this, and let's see if I can get my presentation up.
All
Hey, I think we're going to do it.
right. Okay.
Hey, all right, here it is. You
We got
talked
it.
about it. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we're on good. You're fine. Go right ahead.
Okay, can you see my cursor on there?
I can.
Okay, I'm going to be pointing at some pictures and stuff, and I just want to make sure everybody could see it. Okay,
Yep.
well, actually, things started off in late 1700s when Elias Roberts, he came with his wife Rebecca and his father-in-law, and they moved into Sugar Grove Valley, which is the next valley north of K-25. He came from South Carolina, and I believe his brother came with him. I know he came later. He was there also, Zacchaeus, and they had both fought in the Revolutionary War in South Carolina. So they were Revolutionary War vets, and they moved into this area, and it was Knox County at the time. Roane County and Anderson County weren't up and running at the time. They came. Knox County was a huge county. But anyway, he finally moved over. He moved over south across the ridge, across Black Oak Ridge, and he purchased originally 192 acres, and that was in 1796. Which that date should ring a bell with everybody in Tennessee, because that's when Tennessee became a state.
Right.
And 3 years later, he purchased an additional 500 acres where along Poplar Creek, where it runs into the Clinch River, and that is where the K-25 site now stands, or did stand.
Right.
And it was known as Bald Hill. You mentioned that until it was actually 1881. And it was called Bald Hill because as people moved in, they began to build their houses. They also, that was one of the means of getting money, was cutting down trees. And so they'd cut them down, float them down the Clinch to the Tennessee, and then down to sawmills in Chattanooga. So as they cut the trees down, all the hills were denuded, and it became known as Bald Hill.
Okay.
That's the story I've heard. And then, and as you said, in 1881, Frank Wheat, who was he lived in the community. Matter of fact, he was on the board of trustees for the college and some other things. And he started a post office. He established a post office and named it Wheat. And he began to consolidate. There are a whole lot of post offices. I'll show a list of those later. But by 1881, they consolidated all of them into Wheat, and it became the post office for the whole area. Matter of fact, a year after he did this, he moved to Kansas and never came back. So, but he left his name. So, and in 1942, after it became Wheat, it began to grow. There were a lot of people here, and they had at least 3 stores. There were 3 churches. I'm going to show you pictures of most of these. A service station, a Masonic Lodge, post office, and a school. And there were several schools down through the years. The Roane County Fair was held there in the 30s. And in the late 1930s, TVA had started a cooperative agricultural program with all the residents that was teaching them how to better farm, how to plow their fields, fertilizer. They were going to build a big potato warehouse, a canning place, and so on. And matter of fact, when the president of TVA found out that Groves had picked this area for the Manhattan Project to move in, he went to see Groves, the president did, and say, hey, can't you put it somewhere else? And of course, we know the outcome of that discussion. And Wheat became no more as of 1942, along with all the other communities within the Oak Ridge Reservation. This is a map or a picture, a photo, overhead photo taken in 1942 of a portion of Wheat. And the red line showing here is a rough estimate of where the current turnpike runs. But I'm going to zoom in here and show you where everything is that we're going to be looking at. Here's the Wheat School that was built in 1916. I'm going to show you the store, the McKinney store. The Watson gas station is right here. And then this is the George Jones Memorial Church. And down here is the Crawford Cumberland Presbyterian Church. And this road was known as, from here to here, was known as the Wheat Robertsville Road. This area is known as the Y. And if you went this way, you went to Harriman. If you went this way, you went down to the river, crossed the river on the ferry, and went to Kingston. Now, oops, looks like the red line's moving. So anyway, this was downtown proper, if you wanted to call it that. This was where all the business were. And if you can notice, there's a lot of farm area. Another thing I want to show you is right over here is an orchard. We'll talk about peach orchards here in a little bit, but this is Arnold Orchard. And then over here is another one. This is the McKinney Orchard. There were 7 large peach orchards, but we'll look at those in a little bit. So this is where some of these buildings we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Roane College. Well, if you go to face the church, up the hill to the right in an area up here in these woods is where the Roane College stood. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is giving you an idea of where everything is. Blair Road turns off roughly off the turnpike right here, comes up and follows this route now and around through here. So that's Blair Road. The red light would be right down here.
So when was this photo made? Do you have a year?
Yeah, it's roughly 1942.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is one of the aerials that the Army Corps of Engineers took.
Yeah.
Overviews of the whole reservation area.
Right. I understand. So the seminary was gone by 42.
Yes, it had been gone a long time.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
We still know the location, and there's a monument there. If you want to hike out the Wheat Greenway, you can start there. There's a gate right here. You can walk out to the church, and in there's a sign that points you up a trail to that location.
Good, thanks.
Okay. Starting with the churches, George Jones Memorial Church. It is the only building left standing in Wheat, and it was there because in the 50s, the people of Wheat when the government started tearing down buildings in 1950, the people of Wheat got their representative in Washington, and he got this building saved. So it's the only reason it's still standing there through his efforts. But the church began in 1852 as an arm of the Sulphur Springs United Baptist Church of Christ in Oliver Springs. And then they finally broke off and became, in 1854, the Mount Zion Baptist Church. And they built a church there eventually, which they tore down. And in 1901, they built this church and named it the George Jones Memorial Baptist Church. They took the old building, they didn't tear it down, they just actually removed it from the foundation, moved it down the driveway and across the road, and made a store out of it. They added 5 rooms to it, and I'll show you a picture of that later. And it was the Adams store. And then they built this one. George Jones had been the preacher there for a number of years. He was also, I guess, quite well off, because when they built the church for about $2,500, he donated $2,000 to help in the construction of it. So the new building went up in 1901, and it's still there today. The other church building that was there was the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, and it was down the road. I showed you about a quarter mile from the Baptist church. It had a beautiful stone wall in the front. It was built or founded in 1891. And then it was named after the Reverend Crawford. It's called the Crawford Cumberland Presbyterian Church. And he was the minister there for a while, and then he became active in the Roane College. Now, when we get in, we'll get to talk about the Methodist Church in a minute. It's the way they did churches back then was very interesting, but I wanted to bring this up. These are quotes or minutes from the Presbyterian Church when they would have their meetings. And this is in 1942. And I'm going to zoom in on this one and show you. This one down here is a quote from January. And it was, It was voted unanimously that the trustee be empowered to accept the price offered by the War Department for the church on whatever terms they could make. And this was in January of 1943. And then in the minutes taken in March, it says down here, whoops, I went too far. I'm gonna have to go back. It says that they sold the pews for $100. And the church moved from here and went to Harriman and continued in Harriman after that, after the government took the property and everything. But they didn't have to move out until 1943 because they didn't start the K-25 project until June of 1943. So this property was still being used up to that point.
That's interesting. We think that it happened overnight, but it took several months for all of it to happen, didn't it?
Yes, well, of course, they started Y12 and X10
Yeah.
in February of 1942, but they didn't get
No,
around to
43, Steve.
43. Okay, they started February, well, they didn't get around till starting K-25 till June, so they
Right.
had a little more time to move out.
Yeah, got it.
Now, we don't have a picture of the Methodist church because we don't know what happened to it. I think it was located on the other end of the cemetery next to the Baptist church. It was on the other end of the cemetery, Baptist church on one end, Methodist church on the other. I think it burned down or something, but this gives, John Dickey came into the area in 1873, and the Rome College catalog mentioned the Methodist church was holding services in the Baptist church building. Well, in 1891, they had their own building, and the Presbyterians were meeting with them until they built their church in 1902. Then something happened to the Methodist church, and the Methodists were meeting in the Presbyterian church one Sunday a month. And they in 1942, so they used each other's buildings,
Right.
and it was a community effort apparently that this happened. But in 1942, the Methodist Church was on the Harriman Circuit, which consisted of 5 churches. So there was a lot of people, a lot of people, they attended all these churches. And Bonita Irwin, she lived in Wheat. She was one of the people that I've learned a lot from about Wheat. She was actually a Presbyterian, but she went to the Baptist church. So they went back and forth. It didn't matter, I guess, what church you went to. Okay, let's go to the schools. Back then, before the Board of Educations, all the counties took over, the states took over education later. Each community was responsible for their own education of their children. So the first, let's see, Robertson Schoolhouse was one of the first schools that's known to be in Bald Hill at the time, and that was in the mid-1800s. When John Hickey came in and started the Baptist church, he also started the Bald Hills Church school in the 1876 and 1878. By that time, they had started the Poplar Creek Seminary. All the churches got together in Masonic Lodge, and they decided they needed a better school. So they formed the Poplar Creek Seminary in 1877, and it operated until 1885. And here's the Reverend Crawford again. He was over the Presbyterian church. He became the president and remained the president for quite a while. Well, in 1885, the trustees of the school, the seminary, they petitioned the state to make it a 4-year accredited college. And the state approved that in 1886, and they named it Roane College. Do not confuse this with Roane State Community College. There's nothing in between. Roane College stood by itself, and it consisted, it may have called it college, but you could go from first grade and get your college degree all in one building without crossing the street. So it was more than just a college. And students came from all over, and they had boarding houses, or you could live with families. And they had a neat structure in Wheat. They had 250 acres that had been donated that belonged to the school, the college itself. And anybody could build a house on it. They would provide lumber, to build the house, and you could live there as long as you had something to do with the school. You could board students, you could teach, you worked at the school or something like that. You were allowed to live on this property for free. In 1908, the college was beginning to go down, and so they donated the property to the Rome County Board of Education. The college was closed, and it became the Wheat School, just grades 1 through 12. And in 1916, they built a new building. I'll show you a picture of it, a big 3-story brick building. That was the school, and they called it the high school or Wheat School. It was between, but it went grades 1 through 12. When the Corps of Engineers took over the area, acquired the property for the Manhattan Project, in 1943, the Corps began using the building, the school building, for security guard offices. And then later on, it became a training facility for the operators that were going to operate the gaseous diffusion process in the K-25 building. The school building was the first building to receive a phone line from Oak Ridge when they started working on K-25. Okay, here's a picture of the seminary and the college and a bunch of the students. It was a large clapboard building, and it was a pretty big building after they kept adding on to it. And here's a picture, and it says 1877, but I do not believe that it's the correct date on this, because you can see the college up here on the hill, and it's a huge building, and they had added a lot to that. And where these ladies are sitting right here is where the turnpike runs now. So there you have, that would have been where they're sitting, being the turnpike. If you come down the hill from the college, just off the picture would be where the Baptist church sits now. So see, it'd be just a short walk up to the college now if you want to go see the site. This is a circular, and I wanted to show this because it's interesting. They passed around to advertise the college, and it said Rome College is situated on Poplar Creek between Harriman and Kingston. And being near the Cumberland Mountains, the scenery is very beautiful. The water and air remarkable for their purity, hence free from malaria. So, they advertised the school. Over here, some of the prices: $1 per month for the primary, and the academic was anywhere from $1.75 to $2.50 per month. And room and board, $7.50 a month, but that does not include washing. So that's some of the little things about the school, the college, and they did advertise. Here's a diploma from 1889 that they gave for good attendance, regular attendance, and department, whatever that was, but it was in 1889.
That's deportment.
Deportment.
Yeah, that's their behavior.
And this is well, they also got grades for penmanship. I have a grade card that has penmanship on it, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
But this is a picture of the school that was built after the college when the Board of Education took over. 3-story brick building. And if you'll notice this little white cornerstone down here, that's a marble cornerstone that has Wheat School on it. And on one side, and then on the other side, it has all the school board members and everybody. It's all caved in. But that was a time capsule that they put in there in 1916. And the Masonic Lodge put a lot of information in there. They had put a Bible in there. They put an Indian head buffalo nickel from 1916 in there. They put a Knoxville paper from October 27th, 1916, when they dedicated the school. The Masonic Lodge put some information in there about their lodge, and that was opened later in after 1950, after the school was torn down. And we have that. If you want to see that, you can see it at the K-25 History Center. We have the stone. I'll have a picture of that later. But the building was added on to this back. They added the auditorium and everything. And this is one of the dormitories where students could stay, because people couldn't even people would come from a long distances, and this is the girls' dorm, and it was built in 1920, so that the girls could stay there. They could stay during the week and then go home on the weekends because they didn't have to travel as far. There was another boys' dorm, but in 1927, when this addition was added, they also started bus services. So they didn't need the dormitories anymore because they could bus the children in from around the county. And this became the girls' dorm became a community center for wheat. I pointed out the McKinney store and the Watson gas station. This is Blair Road that runs in the middle. And the road, if where you're standing looking at these buildings, if directly behind you is the road that went to Robertsville and to the Baptist Church and Crawford Church, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. The McKinney store, there's a sign for the Masonic Lodge. They met upstairs, and they were called a Moon Lodge because they met on the first Monday after the full moon, so that they could have the full moon to help. They wouldn't have to ride too much in the dark. There's a little bit of light. So this is inside the McKinney store. This is Mr. McKinney, the owner, and this is Eli Sherman. He lived down where the intersection is with 95 and 58. This is the other store, Adam's store. This was the old Mount Zion Baptist Church that they pulled down the driveway and set it up across the road. And for 40 years, the post office was located right here in this corner of the store. It burned in 1940, and they moved the post office to the McKinney store for 2 years before the government took over. I wanted to talk about the peach orchards. Like I said, they had 7 large peach orchards. Here's another aerial. And if you look at this, the K-25 building set right in here, just to give you a relationship of where wheat and how the K-25 building was. It was set right here. And down here is the school at the very bottom, and the Baptist church and the Crawford church over here. Up here was the largest. It was on the north side of the property, and it's on the north side of the Oak Ridge Reservation. I'll show a closer picture of that here. But this was the largest orchard. Over here was the Highland Orchard, which is second largest. And then down here, I mentioned Arnold's, his orchard, Mr. Edgar Arnold. Let's go to this is Dillis Orchard, a close up. And it runs all, you can see where the trees are, how they're planted. Oops, lost my dot. Anyway, this is where the Dillis Orchard, the largest orchard was. Well, I keep messing up. And if we zoom in on it, you can see here are peach sheds. And this is where they would bring the peaches when they ripened. They would sort them, package them up, and ship them. And here is this line right here. This is the property line between Mr. Hembry, Rice Hembry's property, and the peach orchard. And that was the DOE line. And it came on across, went across the river. Everything south of that became DOE, the Oak Ridge Reservation. So this whole orchard was taken over and as part of the reservation. And the reason the red dot's there is that's my house. That's where I live. I can step out back and step onto which is now the Black Oak Ridge Conservation Easement, and I can see the rows, the terraced rows still remaining where the trees were. And if you walk these trails in the Dillis Orchard Road trail system over here, if you'll notice in the woods, if you're ever up in there walking, you can see where the trees were.
Now, there was a question last time, Steve, about when the cold weather took the trees. And you told me that you thought that when you thought that was. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, Kingston was was the center of peaching around. It wasn't Georgia at the time. It was around Kingston in this area, and they had several blights move in, and finally, I think they had a long run of some cold winters, and the peach it was in the 1950s is what I've heard, is early 1950s that the peach orchards began to go downhill. Of course, that didn't affect wheat because they were already gone.
Yeah.
Due to the fact that the Oak Ridge Reservation had taken them up. Okay, the next orchard, this is the Highland Orchard. And if you know where Heartland Estates is in these woods right here now. So it backed up, and I think that's the property line here for the Oak Ridge Reservation, DOE. So you can hike these trails. There's a trail that goes up here. The North Boundary Trail comes around, and you can hike this trail down back to the East Poplar Road. And this orchard was owned by half owned by the Watsons, the Don Watson's brother. And Don Watson worked there for a number of years. And in 1936, during the peach harvest, he wanted to know where all these peaches were going, because they would harvest the peaches. They would take them over to a town just a little bit. There was a railroad siding that came through the community of Dillis, and they had peach sheds over there. Well, they would take them over, and a train would come through, refrigerated cars, and they would take them to a buyer in Cincinnati, Ohio. He bought all their peaches. Well, Don wanted to know where they were going. So one year, 1936, he put 3 self-addressed envelopes with a question in them. Where are you located, and how much did you buy the peaches for? And he got one response back from Slate, Wisconsin, and they bought the peaches for $3 a bushel. So Dillis peaches got around.
Yeah.
And this is a picture later of Happy Valley, the construction workers camp, when they were building K-25. But this is a picture of Arnold's peach orchard. And Mr. Arnold, this is his house right here on the right. It became a community center in Happy Valley. And as you're driving toward K-25, after you pass under the Hall Road Bridge, this ridge right here, all the way down where you turned in to go to K-25, the first road there up to Portal 3, this was his peach orchard on the side of the hill. So that's where he was located. Now, there were a lot of mills. When people started moving into the area, of course, mills came in, and this is one of them. This mill was known as Wilker Mill, and this is East Fork Poplar Creek, where it empties into Poplar Creek. And there was a dam across here, and it backed up East Fork Poplar Creek for 1.5 miles. This mill is similar to one, it wasn't an overshot mill, but it's similar to, if you've been to Alvin York's mill, he had a big turbine that set in here, and the water would flow through from the creek, and it would turn, and the mill set over it and on these pedestals right here. They're laying side on side. The bridge went across here, the original bridge, and like I said, it was dammed up. And when Watts Bar came in, they tore down the dam, and the mill had to move. And Mr. Baker, who owned it at the time, moved it across the creek on the other side of Poplar Creek and ran it with a gasoline engine.
Now, have you got a year on that?
They think this mill started in 1836.
Okay.
And operated. It was made of wood, it burned, and they built it back and had a metal siding on it. And but it was owned by several different people. Wilker Mill was one of the big names for it. They owned it for a very long time. Matter of fact, the post office was located here.
Huh.
On topo maps up until 1950, it was known as what was that guy's name? Somebody's mill. I can't remember his name now, but it's on maps, topo maps up until that time.
Okay.
There were other maps, other mills up the creek. Nails had a fellow by the name of Nails had one. If you come to the Baptist church, there are 2 millstones, and they came from that mill. They were laying on the bank, and somebody volunteered to go get them. They got a tow truck down there and pulled them out when they were forming the Horizon Center. That mill, you can still see parts of that mill down there, the stone foundations and stuff like that. Okay, I want to show a few houses. This is Lady Gallagher. Now, these people, they had some nice houses. They weren't, hicks living out in the country. This was a nice established community, Wheat was. And Lady Gallagher, her husband had died a number of years before, but when the government moved in and took her 205 acres, this is a picture of her house is right here, right down here. And her property, 205 acres, the K-25 building in its entirety is on her property. Half of the 1401, the conditioning building, is on her property. So her property was well used there. But you can see her house. There's another house right here. This is Hattie Watson's house. Her house was the last house built in Wheat before the government took over. And all of these houses, when the property was acquired, housing was, as you're aware, Oak Ridge had a shortage of housing. And so they would put supervisors in these buildings, workers in these buildings. They used them up until 1950, and then they tore them down. This is Edgar Arnold's house. It became a community center in Happy Valley. Baptist Parsonage. This is the gas station owner. This is Mr. McKinney's house, the owner of the store. Bert Qualls, he lived across the creek from the mill that I just showed you. I just took family members out to his house a couple of months ago. They wanted to see where the old home site was, so I took them out there. Matty Matz lived up behind the store. And here's just some of the things that they raise. They raise wheat, sheep, cattle, pigs. They had crops. These are some of the school buses after 1927. They ran to the county line between Oak Ridge and then over into Bethel Valley, all the way to Kingston to pick up kids. This is a boarding house where the boys lived when they would stay and then go to school. This is the last banquet, and it's a 4-H banquet that was held in Wheat School in 1942 before the government. When the kids went home for Christmas break in 1942, they did not come back to school. They went elsewhere, mostly to Harriman over in Dillis. The Roane County Fair was held at Wheat. This is in the auditorium. And they even built barns for animals and everything so they could have the fair there. It was a big fairgrounds there next to the school. In 1932, the Roane College started reunions. And the reunions are still held on the first Sunday of October of each year at the church, starting at 11 o'clock. If you want to come, you're all invited. Come, we'll have a meeting for about an hour, and then we'll go out and have lunch. Bring your lunch. We have dinner on the grounds. DOE sets up a tent for us to have. They have porta potties and everything, and that's been going on since 1932. They expanded it to the high school, the reunion, a couple of years after this photo, and then they extended it to, it'd be just a Wheat homecoming for everybody that lived in Wheat. They say that up to 500 to 600 people would show up for those reunions at the church. They have it at the Baptist church. This is the cornerstone from the school. And this is the bell from the school. If you want to see these, you can see these at the K-25 History Center. They're part of the Wheat display. Here's their football team. They had a girls' basketball team. I mentioned Bonita Irwin. This is her sitting here. And this is this is a root cellar. And Wheat was getting electricity. That's an electric stove. Here's an electric refrigerator. TVA was bringing electricity into the area at the time. DOE, they'd started in the late 30s, and they were getting electricity in the area. That's an electric lamp there. Bacon. Good farming here. This is a quilt that is hung in the church during the homecoming. Each one of the stars represents one of the boys that went from Wheat and served in World War II. And the gold stars, of course, they represent the boys that did not come home. Now, all of these guys, when they went off to war, they lived in wheat. When they came home, they didn't live in wheat anymore. As they served to fight the war, their homes were taken for the government project. And this is the oldest grave on the Oak Ridge Reservation, the oldest known grave, and it's Polly Rankin. It says 1811, and it's in Scott Cemetery. That's the cemetery across the road where Wisconsin Avenue comes down. You go over there and look around, you'll find this cemetery, this gravestone.
And that's right across the road from the guardhouse.
Yeah, the guardhouse down there in Wisconsin Avenue.
Yeah.
This is a list of the government's post offices that were in the area. There's a bunch of them, and they all begin to consolidate. And by 1981, most of them were, Wheat was the main post office in the area. Wheat served all the way down Sugar Grove Valley to Kingston, where the river, where you cross the Clinch River into Kingston, and all the way to over into Bethel Valley, and all the way to the county line in Oak Ridge. The last postal delivery guy, I should have put a picture in here of him, was Micah Sellers. He would do half the routes, half of the days, and the other half of the route, he'd alternate days. So you got your mail every other day. Now, that's the end of Wheat. If anybody got a question, and Ray wanted me to talk about the construction worker camps. Is that correct?
Yes. Anyone have any questions for Steve about Wheat? If you do, just unmute yourself and ask away.
That was just a quick history of Wheat. We could go on and on if you wanted to.
I know we could, but I appreciate that. Go ahead and talk about the worker construction camps just a little bit.
Okay, as everybody's aware, there was a shortage of housing in Oak Ridge. They were trying to build Oak Ridge, the residential area, and they couldn't keep up with the number of workers coming in. So a lot of the workers for Y12 and X10 lived in Oak Ridge proper. But out at K25, which was on the far end of the reservation, they started setting up construction workers camps. And these areas that I have circled, you can see K25 plant here. And K25, K27, they started building Happy Valley. And this was to put in, actually it began right down here with West Happy Valley. These were the first hutments. There were 450 hutments in here. If you're aware of what a hutment is, I'll show you a picture, but it's a 16 by 16 plywood hut that had 4 to 5 people in it. Then Happy Valley extended. They had hutments, they had dormitories, barracks, trailers, and they built a school here to, as the families moved in, they had children, and they called it Wheat School, but it was not the Wheat School that we just talked about. This was one that the Oak Ridge Reservation ran, the Corps of Engineers. Then there's, and this in Happy Valley was where the J.A. Jones workers were, and they're the ones that built the K25 building. The Wheat Colony over here was where Ford Bacon Davis construction workers lived. There were 2,000 people lived here, and they built the 1401 building. They built the air and nitrogen plants and other ancillary buildings that supported the K25 building. In Happy Valley, there were between 12 and 15,000 people lived here, because at the time they were doing construction at K25, there were 25,000 construction workers working on this site. So they had to be housed, and this only took care of a portion of them. The rest lived off site in farmers' houses and anything where they could find housing. And as the building was built, there were 25,000 construction workers, but at the same time, the Kellex operation that was going to be operating the plant, and the carbon what is it? Well, you became Union Carbide.
Yeah,
That was going
it-
that was
Carbide,
operating.
yeah, Carbide Chemical Company.
That's it.
3 C's. I don't remember the right
They
one.
had 11,000 operators that
Wow.
were going to operate the building. So the total population of K25 in July of 1945 was about 36,000 people.
Wow.
So, and if you remember the Special Engineer Detachment, they had their barracks. This is their barracks right here. This was women's housing. It was dormitories, single women's dormitories, and then there were men dormitories here as well. And all of these, each one of these places had mess halls. They had recreation halls, company stores. And if you recall, at this time, there was segregation. Officially on the books, there was no segregation, but it was. This area became, if you look on the maps, it's called the colored hutments. This is where the African Americans lived. And not only that, but they were split as well. The men and women lived in different parts of the hutman area. Even if you were married, the men and women did not live together. They were separated. That was also the case in Oak Ridge in the African American hutman area, where it's where Aubrey's is, in that area there. Aldi's, that area across from the Noah was where the African American hutman area was in Oak Ridge. This is a close up of Happy Valley. You can see the barracks. You can see hutments down here on the bottom. This area is trailers. People lived in trailers. And over here were 100 victory homes. I'll show you pictures of that. You've already seen one. But this is where they put families. These are the only ones, besides the barracks and the dormitories, that had indoor plumbing. All of these campers, the trailers and the hutments, they had laboratories that you had to go to. That's why they called it the Happy Valley Campground, because it was like camping. In this picture, this right here is the Coney Island Recreation Hall. It was like if you went in to an arcade, this is where a lot of the recreation took place. This is the bowling alley. And this is a large mess hall right here. They had a national store that was right here. This is sort of like a store you go get all kinds of stuff, a department store type thing. Here's another picture. You can see K25 at the north, and at the south end is Happy Valley. They had a bakery. They had an ice house, cold storage. They had other storage areas, I guess, for personnel to put store stuff in, and their town hall was right here. They also had a little hospital area where you could get medical treatment. This is what a hutman area looked like. You had the hutments, and then here's the bathhouse. And the hutments, like I said, were made of plywood. They had a stove in the middle. Most of them were coal burning stoves. Some of them might have been kerosene, but you had bunks. You talk about 16 by 16. That's a nice sized bedroom, but you had anywhere from 4 to 5 men staying in a hutman. They had the trailers. None of these had running water or bathroom facilities. You had to go to your bathhouse for that, where you'd have sinks, your toilets, and your showers. This is inside one of the trailers. It's what we camp in today. This is one of the dormitories. This is the women's area where the dormitories were. There were several dormitories. And then the barracks. This is the victory homes. And there were 100 of them. And you can see they've got windows, they've got a door, and they had sewer. So they had a bathroom in them. I showed you this is a close up of the African American quarters. This was hutments. There were 450 hutments in here. This is the SED, the Special Engineer Detachment. they had a lot of men on site that worked. You can see this white building back here behind them is the K-25 building. That was across the creek. This is the J.A. Jones, I mean the Ford Bacon Davis area. And this is just the Hutmans. There was a trailer area. I'll show you this here. This is close up of, there was a trailer area here. This is the government trailers. And if you had your own trailer, you could bring it and put it right here. And all the Hutmans were down here. This is where the white Hutmans were. And if you can see on the map that says 100 Hutmans colored, this is where the African Americans lived. And the way it was set up, this is one, you had a bathhouse in the middle and 10 Hutmans surrounding it that used that bathhouse. And in this place, there were five cots to a Hutman. This is the community center. They did try to provide some sort of recreation or better living conditions, or recreation to try to keep that workers happy. That's a brief summary of the workers camps around K-25.
Thanks. I have a question that's come in about your earlier presentation. It says there used to be a train that had 2 round trips a day from Harriman to Lake City that stopped at the Dillis Peach Shed. What would have been the approximate years?
Well, since I would assume that would be before 1942, because that spur, if it went through Dillis, that was to pick up the peaches and stuff. And the main line ran following Highway 62 between Harriman and Oliver Springs. And this was a spur off of that. It started down close to Oliver Springs and came out in Harriman, that spur, if it did. That's interesting. I've not heard of that.
Earl, can you unmute yourself and let Steve know who you are?
Hey, Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think there's still the railroad bed that runs in the Dillis community that goes all the way to Harriman. And
Yes.
I think this might have been in the 1920s or so, because the train ran through there. It was a passenger train too. There was a Y in Lake City where the train would turn around and go back, and it was like 2 round trips a day, but I never knew the timeline for that. I would think 1920s would be it.
Well, I would say that, I don't know. That's a good question. I wasn't aware that they ran a passenger train, but I guess they did. But I know where the old road bed is. I've followed it myself. I've noticed that since I live over in the area. I go down Dickey Valley a lot, and yes, you can still see where the old train bed ran. And if you go over to the Dillis School, you can see where it ran behind the school as well.
I checked out a book at the Oak Ridge Library years ago that had all the historical train routes in Roane County. And that's where I learned about this and the story related to that particular train.
Okay. Well, I've learned quite a bit about the spur that they brought in from Blair, 7.5 mile spur that they brought in from Blair to bring all the supplies in to K-25. And that bridge across Poplar Creek, I found in the Manhattan District history about that railroad and that bridge. That bridge, they found it had been disassembled, and it was in a Chicago rail yard. And Groves had it brought down and reassembled across Poplar Creek so they could get the railroad across the creek there just as it enters K-25.
So that's where that bridge came from?
Yes.
That's a metal railroad bridge across Poplar Creek, right?
That's correct. Yes.
I'd always heard that was from TVA.
No, it's in the Manhattan District history that they got it from Chicago.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Any
Okay.
other questions for Steve? Yes.
I have just a statement. I came to Oak Ridge in the 1970s, and I joined an investment club, and they had already been, this investment club had been ongoing for at least a dozen years or so before. But in honor of wheat, they named it Wheat Investment Club. And I thought that was interesting. So, and it was the longest running investment club in Oak Ridge for a number of years. Once we got old enough, I guess it dissolved like wheat did. But for a long time, it was the longest investment club in Oak Ridge. And they recognized wheat. That was the thing. So I thought I'd just mention that.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I know Steve does as well. Well, Steve, we appreciate you being with us. And I want to share just a couple more slides here. Let's see, that's the church that Steve talked about. And I want to ask you if you would consider topics for the next session. These are ones I'm thinking about. There's a story about a murder that happened prior to Oak Ridge, very near where Robertsville School is now. It's written by Mark Griffith, and he calls it Murder Will Out. And that's an interesting phrase that he'll convey to you about why that is the case. And then I've got about half of the Robertsville history that we didn't get to this time that I will include next time. And then the Emory Road, the earliest road from about the base of the Clinch Mountain that went to Nashville now. And it was the earliest road from the east to the west. And then anything you would like to have included, I'd be glad to bring that in. And you can do that by just sending me an email at draysmith at comcast.com or .net. I can get that right in a minute. Or any other way. I'm on Facebook and you can get to me that way. Our next class now, still yet, even more stories from the secret city. I don't know how long I can keep adding adjectives to that title, but it'll start on September the 25th and October the 2nd, October the 9th will be the 3 sessions for it. Any comments that are questions that you have before we've got a couple more minutes before we wrap up. Any comments that you'd like to make or questions?
Ray?
Yes.
Last time you talked about the Oppenheimer movie.
Yes.
And the special showing at Tinseltown.
Right.
Okay, I'd also heard that the Oak Ridge schools, they're holding some kind of venue on the 19th, which is Wednesday, with a 90-minute discussion panel and then a screening of the documentary Oppenheimer After Trinity. So this is a little different, but it's still that same week.
Yes, it is. And I'll pay you later for that advertisement. I appreciate it. I'm going to be on that panel at the high school, and it is in the evening of the 19th. NBC has created that documentary, and it will be shown. They have an agreement with the school to allow them to show it there, and they will show it on the 19th, and then we'll have a panel discussion about Oppenheimer at that time. And then the premiere of the movie is going to be on I don't know what I said about the month, but in my mind, I don't remember it being July, but it's July the 19th. And then on July the 20th at Tinseltown, Katie with the Explore Oak Ridge has rented 2 movie theaters. This is being sponsored by UT Battelle, East Tennessee Economic Council, UCOR, and they will, I think they're going to be sending some of their employees, and I think you can find out about it at exploreoakridge.com and get tickets. Now, all the proceeds from that will go to benefit the Oak Ridge History Museum. So I encourage you to be a part of that. And you're welcome to come to the 19th event at the high school. So thank you for mentioning that. Anything else before we wrap up?
I wanted to thank Steve for the wonderful presentation. You're really organized, very informed, and it was very interesting. Thank you.
All right.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. Steve's
And
been a
I'd like to put out my invitation again. If you want to come to the wheat reunion, we'll be having it the first Sunday of October of this year at the church. So come on out. We'll start at 11. We'll be there earlier and we'll stay the afternoon. Matter of fact, we haven't had a member of Wheat that lived there be with us for the last couple of years, just their families. But this year, I think there's a lady coming in. She was 8 when she moved out of Wheat. She's going to be there. She's a member of the Qualls family. I took her. She's 89. I took her back to the old homestead where she grew up just this past year, back in March, I think it was. So
Wonderful.
appreciate what you're doing there, Steve. I think that's an
That's for
important
sure.
aspect of our history that you're helping to preserve.
Yep.
All right. With a last, if I can get this thing to behave, a last closing comment, just a personal one. The reason we didn't have 3 weeks in a row this year is that I went to Belo Horizonte, Brazil last week. And I was there because of the Tennessee Children's Home. We built a children's home in Belo Horizonte. 2.7 million people live in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, and 6 million live in the metropolitan area. That 2.7 million is just the city itself. This is a sunset picture from the hotel room there in Belo Horizonte. And on the day we left, we went to a Brazilian restaurant where they cut the meat right off of this sword looking thing and put it onto your plate. I had a good trip, but I'm glad to be home. And I look forward to having you all again and anyone you want to encourage. We'll do this again in September the 25th, October the 2nd, and October the 9th. Thank you very much for spending your time with us, and have a good day.
Thank you, Ray. Very nicely done.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your dedication.
Thank you. Steve, thanks again for coming.
all right, appreciate it.
All right, we'll
I
see
think
you.
Bob had a question and I said Slate, Wisconsin for the where Don got a response back for the wheat, for the peaches from Wheat.
Oh, okay.
He asked about that.
Thank you for
Okay.
getting, I appreciate that.
All right, yeah. So that was Slate, Wisconsin. They went a long way. All right.
They did. All right, we'll see you all. Thanks for coming again.